Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this chat, I'd like to talk about the myth, or to some extent, at least, the myth of these brilliant Asians. Chinese are also intelligent, and all this sort of stuff. And it seems to be something that's going around. Well, the whole Western world at the moment, given the amount of Chinese that are, and to some extent people from the subcontinent too, that are coming to the West in large numbers and attending school and college and so on. So there's a myth running around that they're so intelligent, and we need to just talk about that and put some perspective on it. Now, I've traveled the world many times, working for corporations, doing business in all different continents, and a lot of that business has been done all across Asia and indeed elsewhere. But so when you're sitting down talking business with people and talking the mathematics of profits and sales numbers and business agreements and distribution agreements and manufacturing contracts and OEM contracts for factories, that sort of thing, you're going through a lot of, I never thought it was particularly complex, but I guess complex enough issues. And there was a need to cover a lot of territory sometimes in these meetings, or a series of meetings with people in Asia, including Chinese, of course. So you get to measure pretty quickly that if you're dealing with brilliant people, or you're dealing with people that are struggling to sort of keep up, or people that maybe are just managing to get there, or people that are so bright they're ahead of you, that sort of thing. So you get to feel that pretty quickly. And so if the Asians or the Chinese are hugely intelligent, then there was no evidence of it whatsoever when I was traveling around. There's some of them that weren't necessarily stupid, but in terms of being intelligent, no. They had good memory. Some of them, they could memorize things, and they could produce a document that they'd read and that we discussed a week previous or something like that, and they could remember a phrase or a passage from it, and some of that was reasonably impressive. But in terms of understanding the big picture and all the components of the picture, then I never got an inkling that they were particularly bright at all. And in fact, some were I would even say embarrassing in their inability to grasp the reality of certain practical issues. They were, some of this, to some extent, they were trying to play the tough negotiator type card, but they were doing it in such a clumsy way that they came across as two-bit amateurs that were just didn't know what they were doing, and they were floundering and trying to compensate from the floundering by overdoing the tough guy act and that sort of thing. So there were also around, not all, but much of Asia, corruption and cronyism is absolutely rampant. So people don't necessarily need to be very, very bright. They just need to rely on their corrupt relationships, or paying bribes, or whatever, to get by. So that tends to be a situation that doesn't cultivate people to use their brains very much, unless it's in an underhanded, covert manner or something like that. Now, I don't doubt. In fact, I'm sure that when Asians or Chinese, we're talking about really at the moment, come to the West and they sit for exams, they can do fairly well. But when you get brought up on a very substantial character set, especially one as complicated as the Chinese one, or the Japanese kanji character set, especially when you're brought up on something that complicated and that big, then you tend to have a capacity to memorize. It's trained from a young age. And those things are fairly complex to remember, and so they get that very rigorous training in dealing with. You've got to remember a lot of things and a lot of shapes and a lot of that sort of stuff, and so they do rather well at that. So when they come to the West, or to do exams and that sort of thing, then that memorizing and remembering shapes and pattern, that sort of capacity or ability that's cultivated at a young age, then they tend to do quite well. Now, in in the West, by contrast, we've got a smaller alphabet or character set, but we tend to, although that's been lost now, we tend to be trained in understanding how it works, and that's something that the Asians generally sort of don't really understand or don't get involved in, certainly not to the same extent. You memorize what it is, but how it works and why it does what it does, who cares? So there's a different concept of learning. Now, we also see the same with students from, say, the subcontinent, India and Pakistan for that matter, or Bangladesh. And they also have this cramming education sort of concept where they don't really understand what's going on, but they'll just cram their minds with swatting up and really hitting the books before the exam, and they do a pretty good job of it. So you can call that intelligence, but it's not. Now, let's suppose it is intelligence. Now, let's say that they're both highly intelligent because they do okay in the exams. I've seen in some advanced high schools, the ones that are supposed to pick the best kids, the brightest kids, there's often majorities of Indian or Chinese in some of these schools in Australia. So they're doing, now, even if we make an allowance for political correctness and waving them on through just to get equal, racial outcomes and that sort of thing, they must still be doing all right. But let's suppose they are. Let's suppose they're super intelligent people. I don't believe they are, and certainly not by my experience, not by a long stretch, particularly not from India, for goodness sakes. But let's suppose they are a particularly intelligent and bright people. Then why is India a basket case economy? Why has it been so for 500 years, more than 500 years? Why has China been a basket case economy for 250, 300 years, and so on? So why is it so corrupt? Why is corruption so rife in India that you can barely scratch your nose without having to pay a bribe or someone demanding a bribe? Why is in China there's so much bribery and corruption and so on? So if these people are so bright, why aren't they rich countries at the very forefront of innovation, invention and technology and so on? But they're not. They're basket case. Yeah, China and India, and China is only doing okay because the West moves all their manufacturing to China. Without that, China would still be a basket case. India the same. It wasn't for all the jobs that were sent to India, the call centres and the IT jobs, and bringing millions of IT workers into the West, so they send their money back to India to the families and all that sort of thing. Without that, they'd both be chronic basket cases. They'd have economies that even though they've got billions of people, it would barely be bigger than the economy of Australia with 25 million people. So if they are that bright, then why are their countries and economies not working? Why do they suddenly become bright only when they come to the West, and in Australia in this case? Now, I've spoken to a number of people that have come from India and China and elsewhere around Asia for that matter, but the other countries around Asia, other than Japan, are certainly not noteworthy, or Taiwan, are certainly not noteworthy for their industriousness and high intellect, and well below China and Japan. So I've spoken to them about it, and they say, well, look, the reason India doesn't get, for example, there's an Indian guy I was talking to, the reason India doesn't go anywhere is because of the corruption and because of the racial tensions and the tribal tensions and the unrest and the government's useless and yada yada yada. So all these sorts of things, and they say that they had to get out of there if they wanted any sort of a life, unless they were part of that very small rich elite. So they come to the West where they can get a job, firstly, because the unemployment in India is like 50%. So they come to the West and get a job and do okay for themselves. But often the Indians are having to, when they come here, they have 3 or 4 generations are living in one fucking house. And if you look at the amount of people going out to work, and there's the grandparents looking after the children, sometimes 2 generations of children, or and the cousins are coming over, and they're all living in this house. And you look at all the incomes coming in the door, they can do all right for themselves, but only because they've got that many people out there working. But just in a suburb I was in recently, and getting some getting some medication for a relative and taking a relative to have some medical tests and so on. They go to the pharmacy, and that's an Indian-owned pharmacy employing Indians, filled up at the gasoline station, the petroleum station, on the way there. That's owned by Indians, and only Indians work there. Then going to the place that does the X-rays, that's wall to wall Indians. There's only one Anglo girl on the desk. All the rest were Indians. And then going to some other place there again, that was all Indians. So I mean, they tend to move into enclaves, and the medical industry is an example here, and take over. Similarly, if I look at a lot of the specialists in Australia, things like heart specialists and the neurosurgeons, that sort of thing, a lot of those are Chinese and highly thought of, by the way, in the industry. So they must be doing something all right, and there must, on the balance of probability, there's got to be some bright people among them, same as there is in the West. I mean, you just think what it was like when you're in high school or college or whatever. Was every kid super bright? Of course not. There were a few that really stood out as being bright. And it's the same wherever you go. There's that. So the ability to pass exams and to study hard is something that I've noticed the Indians and the Chinese and the Japanese too, by the way, are very, very good at. The Japanese are a little bit different. They went off another trajectory in the I think it was around the late 1860s, when they wanted to modernise quickly, and they made an effort not simply to learn the technology of the West and the systems and procedures, but to improve upon it. Now, to improve upon it means they had to at least comprehend it to some degree if they were to make improvements. And they did in many areas, just in time and managerial efficiency, quality control, things like that. They've done very well at it. Even in the 1930s, some of their ship designs, aircraft designs and so on were quite innovative. So that suggests that they comprehended in some detail the technology that they were dealing with. Now, the rest of them aren't necessarily like that, or certainly not to the same extent of Japan. So just coming back to it, are the Asian or Chinese and Indians super bright? No, they're not. Are they good at passing exams because they've had this training at an early age that they have to memorize vast swathes of information, such as the complicated and extensive character set and alphabet, then yes, they've had to do that. So because of that training, that gives them a specific edge in just at the point of exams. But I've worked with them, hired them, worked alongside them, and as I say, dealt with them in their home countries, doing business all around the world. And if there are particularly intelligent ones among them, then I haven't met them. Maybe they sort of run away, and I don't see the bright ones. I see the well-connected ones. I see the corrupt ones. I see the ones that are acting tough and trying to show that they can stand toe-to-toe with Whitey and win the negotiation. I see that. But as for bright ones, they're pretty rare, same as they are anywhere else in any other country. Particularly bright people are rare. So that's my take on that, and I hope that puts the myth of the super intelligent Asian in some better perspective for you. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.